Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Negative Alpha Bravo. And this is 7 November Golf. Roger, request you check your Romeo side. I'll go ahead and check my Tango side. 7 November Golf out. November 8 to 5, and 8 5, 7 November, say again. Roger, 7 November, go. I copied a while ago, 1 Charlie transmission that my thing used, November, go, 1 Charlie, and 8 5, this is 7 November, Charlie. Now 1 Charlie, 7 November, go.
This is 1 Charlie, welcome to your last. You're Brandon 158 extra 5 o'clock, 1200 between teams, this is local. Also request 3 units take inbound message to see if we can try to get Whiskey 9 and 8 for pause. This is a pleasure, I hope.
And this is 7 November, Roger, stand by.
Got that.
Got it? Alright. And all units, this is 7 November Golf. My unit Alpha, Echo, X-ray Alpha, Alpha in there.
One Charlie, Alpha Bravo.
Hey, I never took a dip.
Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Whiskey 9, Yankee, 7 November Golf, over. This is Whiskey 9 to go. Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Whiskey 9, Yankee, 7 November Golf, over. This is Whiskey 9 to go. Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Negative Alpha Bravo. And this is 7 November Golf. Roger, request you check your Romeo side. I'll go ahead and check my Tango side. 7 November Golf out. November 8 to 5, and 8 5, 7 November, say again. Roger, 7 November, go.
All right, welcome to another stream. Here we're streaming on multiple channels, multiple platforms. We have the notorious Jason from Veterans Info Tap. We have David from VA Housing Education, who truly is the expert of anything to do with VA home loans. And if you just ask him one question, he's going to give you a 10-minute answer, and you will see the expertise come out of David every time. I'm very serious about that. And then we have myself, the mediocre at its best, mediocrity at its best, the Civ Div over here. We're going to be fielding questions and really talking. I was able to choose the topic for this live stream, which I love doing. And it is none other than how, look at that. It is none other than how veterans can be rich. Now, I know that's kind of a clickbaity title, but this is something I genuinely believe in. And to kickstart the conversation, I seriously, genuinely, legitimately, whatever word you can use, truly believe that veterans who are rated specifically at 50% and above can live a debt-free American dream type of life. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And to start it off, David, what are your thoughts on veterans who receive compensation for VA for claims that are service connected by the VA and living that American dream?
I agree 100%. I mean, and it's a great topic because so many veterans struggle with either debt management or putting themselves in a good position. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. And this is also another good reason that if you're thinking about filing for disability, you should probably get up off the couch and, watch you guys and everything you do. But because there's still people that reach out today that watch your channel, they're like, yeah, I'm still waiting. Like, I'm still putting together. Like, it's been 3 years. Come on, let's get it together and let's do something about it because the ratings are always changing. But that's one of the greatest pieces for a veteran to be able to either enter home ownership is to pay off their debt and be debt free. Even though taking on a mortgage technically is taking on debt, but it gives you that stability, right? That's what most veterans yearn for is, if you are active duty and you're PCSing every 3 years, you kind of yearn to have your own place. So it's a great topic. So thank you for picking that.
Absolutely. So real quick to kick this off, we'll start with members. I don't know if it's members of CivDiv or members of Veterans InfoTap. What I have found, Jason, is I see a lot of your members that are also members on the CivDiv. And so for those who are the double whammy, I love you 2 times, okay? But we have Trish Garcia. Thank you very much. We definitely appreciate that. We have Donald York, Jeffrey Campbell, Panther Minus. Okay, welcome. And we have Tony Ajuder. Welcome to the membership of either channel, depending on which one you join. Jason, when it comes to veterans using compensation to truly be debt-free, not live paycheck to paycheck, what are your initial thoughts on that one?
My initial thoughts are, look, we all have to be adults, right? Don't get your disability pay and go on and buy a boat and a motorcycle and a truck and everything else, and then just be actually upside down even more because you've just blown past everything that you just got. Take a minute and breathe and be smart. Now, when it comes to this topic, I love this topic, and I love home ownership in it, David, because the reason why, at least in my opinion, and I'm simple J over here, but I think that home ownership is one of the best ways for the average person, right, who doesn't come from a wealthy family, to actually create and generate some sort of wealth, some sort of a real net worth, if you will. And I think that leveraging that, even if you're taking on debt, that where else in the world can you say, I have a $500,000 asset or $1 million asset when you're working wherever you're working? To be able to leverage an asset that's worth that much money, David, is just mind-blowing to me when you just step back for a minute and just think about what's really happening, right? And especially with a VA home loan, David, explain to me what that process looks like just for a simple person who wants to get into creating some wealth, creating a net worth. How can they wrap their hands around that asset?
Yeah, and I'll also add to that before I answer it is that a lot of countries, you can't leverage 100% loan. Most of the time, they're doing minimum 20 to 50% down payments, or they're buying homes in cash. So VA loan is phenomenal. It's 100% financing. Technically, there's no limits. If you want to buy $1 million home and not put money down, as long as you're eligible and qualified, you can do that, right? No private mortgage insurance. If you have a VA disability, depending on the state you live in, you also don't pay property taxes, right? Kind of dependent on the state. So huge benefits for veterans to leverage that VA home loan. And I'll tell you guys is that one of the most common things that happens to veterans is they're eligible to use the VA loan, but they're not qualified to actually execute on it because of their financial picture. That's why it's like you got to kind of figure out, like, if you get back pay from the disability, don't go out and buy more things, because we also see that. It's more of like, hey, what do I pay off? And what are the strategies in order to get myself into a financial position where I'm not spending more than I'm making? Or, if you're married to somebody that spends a lot of money, also, how do you this isn't like a relationship advice, by design, but those are things you really have to kind of take into consideration for this.
Right. Clay, I want to jump in with one thing here real quick, just because it's on this topic. And I think that one, you kind of, or David actually brought it up, and thank you, David. It's, here you are, the mortgage guy, and you're talking benefit stuff, and the call, the urgency to go get what you earned, right? So many people out there are discouraged, maybe for whatever reasons, think that they should not be filing for disability compensation. And I think part of it is just the words that are used as well, right? If you just called it a, post-military benefit, or something, and then it just ended up being this. It's a lot different of a feeling than disability. Disability makes everybody think I lost a leg, I lost use of something, I got some major physical issues, and that's not the case. So for those watching, if you're on the fence, get off the fence. You earned it. There's 1,000 different reasons that you can say you don't, but you do. And you should get with an accredited rep, have a conversation, and get that claim in. File an intent to file today. Here's the bottom line, and then I'm going to kick it over to you, Clay. A VA disability claim is literally a potentially $1 million deal in your hands. It is substantial. Just to run the quick numbers, if you had $1 million in the bank earning 6% interest rate, that would give you about $60,000 per year, because 6% of $1 million is $60,000. Well, you divide that down over 12 months. That's $5,000 per month. Let's take $1,000 out for taxes. That leaves you with $4,000. Well, guess what? That's 100% rating for a veteran with a spouse and a dependent. So all of a sudden, it's like you have $1 million in the bank, and you're just earning that interest off of it in a very safe sort of a way. So it is $1 million deal, especially when you get into the 100% range. Clay, talk to us about other things that we can be thinking about, and I definitely want to loop David in with a couple more questions.
Absolutely. So it is of my opinion, and I'm not a financial guru or accredited CPA or EA or any of that. However, I like to think of myself as not being too stupid. Okay. And what I mean by that is, it's my opinion that veterans who are working full-time specifically, and who receive VA compensation should live within their means with their full-time income only, and not pretend like VA compensation does not exist. Okay. And it's my opinion that veterans seriously should be using that compensation to pay off debt, like credit cards, car loans, and then eventually their mortgage. Now, I know that's when people kind of get a little antsy, is, do I pay off my mortgage? Do I go, mutual fund, 401k, whatever that looks like for you? I just want you to do something. Okay. That would be my advice. And when it comes to David, I'm curious, David, when you have veterans who are awarded back pay, or they have, they're using their compensation to pay off debts, they get this back pay, and all of a sudden they put a down payment on like a brand new car, they're still going to owe 50, 40 grand while they're going through the home ownership process. Do you ever come across anyone, veteran specifically, who, hey, we have this plan, we're doing this, we're about to buy a home, I bought a car, or I have a credit card, or some type of debt emerges during that process? I'm sure you've dealt with that.
Yes.
Do you have any personal stories when it comes to that, and some advice on that end?
Yeah, let me talk about. There's a couple things to this. So I really don't see. Looking back up, is that when veterans typically look at their VA disability and their debt for housing, they typically, from what I hear, is veterans are like, I don't want to pay more for my mortgage than my VA disability rating. So I always know if something were to happen to my job, at least my home is paid for, right? Especially if you're at the 100%, because that's a lot of money. The other part to that is that, yes, we've seen people go out and purchase vehicles a week before closing, thinking like, oh, lender's not going to check. I'm already pretty much done. Closing's next week. And then all of a sudden we're like, wait a second, you don't qualify anymore. And now you need to sell that vehicle back at a loss. So that's happened a couple times. Other times we'll have veterans that strategically are like, hey, listen, I am currently overseas with the family. Like, I'm stationed in Germany. We don't have a vehicle. We're coming back. We're buying a house, but we need to buy a car. In those cases, as long as you communicate that with us, then it's a pretty easy process, right? We just need to gather more. It's just all paperwork. And that's what people probably get most frustrated with in lending or anything in general, is like the amount of paperwork that generates that they need to provide. Because if your financial picture changes throughout your transaction, that's just going to warrant just red flags. Like, why are you buying a car out of nowhere without even talking to anybody? Now, what happens that after you close, then the lender doesn't care about that, but it's really leading up to that piece. And with that disability rating, if you qualify for the property tax exemption in a lot of areas, that is pretty significant. depending on where you are. Like if you're in like North Carolina, you can buy a $500,000 place and taxes are like $1,200 a year. You go to Illinois, you buy a $500,000 place, they're $16,500 for a $500,000 place. Huge difference, right? And again, those laws are also changing. But let me share with everybody. Can you share my screen for just the credit cards? And I want to show you guys, an example of if you have outstanding debt right now. Let's say at $5,000 at 18%. Actually, let's just be more realistic. A lot of the credit cards are at 28. So in this example, if you made the minimum payment, right, it takes you almost 292 months and you're paying almost $11,000 in interest for that money. So sometimes people will go on vacation, they'll spend $5,000 to go to, wherever they want to go. And they really don't realize that you're almost paying $16,000 for that vacation. So there's different ways, and you can cut this one out, Clay. So there's different ways that veterans can tackle their debt. So one of them is really, you need to sit down, and this is going to be painful because it should be, is you need to manually print out all your statements, not the e-statements. I'm a fan of actually like reviewing it and being like, oh, I'm paying 29.99% interest. Like that's not good, right? You want to see how much you're actually paying, what the interest rate is. And on there, it's also going to tell you, if you make the minimum payment, this is what it's going to look like. You need to gather all your bills so you know how much money is going out. And then you need to look at your net income on how much money you're bringing in. This includes any side gigs that you have, anything that you have. When you do that, it allows you to then focus in on how you want to pay the debt off in a way that actually makes sense. Not just like, hey, we're going to throw a dart at it and just kind of like pay off this one thing. So 2 schools of thought. There's a debt snowball method and there's a debt avalanche method, which I think are probably the 2 most common ones. The first one, for the debt snowball, the key to this one is you're paying off the smallest debt first so you can get rid of those small payments, and then you can accelerate the larger debt after that, right? So if you have a $300, $500, $600, and then like a $5,000 payment, you're focusing in on paying off the first ones as fast as you can. The debt avalanche focuses on paying the highest interest first, minimum payments on the other debt, which in a way makes sense. If you have, let's say, a 0% interest credit card, why would you be accelerating to pay that off when you have another one that's 30%? You want to focus on the bigger debt. If you have, let's say, a house and then you have credit, a car payment, and then you have other debt, you really need to sit down and do the math to see how much interest you're paying on each of these. Because the car may have a low interest rate. Your house, if you bought a couple years, may have a really low interest rate. So then you need to focus in on paying off your higher interest debt and having a game plan. You can also consolidate stuff depending on your credit. So there's also different things that we can go over within that.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of the snowball method. And I think for veterans specifically, that's for like the gen pop, right? The general American nasty civilian, as we veterans like to say, right? And so looking at veterans specifically, your $1,500 from VA compensation, assuming you're living within your means of your full-time employment,
right,
you can just dump. I would say I personally would do all of it. Let's just say half, because I understand that might be difficult for many people. You could dump half of that onto whatever payment is going out. And eventually, that VA compensation will lead you to be debt-free. And there's basically two things that are going to happen, right? Veterans are either going to spend their VA compensation very wisely to help them in life, or they're going to spend their VA compensation to accrue more debt. That's what's going to happen. I am definitely not a fan of the more debt one. And I truly believe that veterans specifically, if anyone's going to live debt-free in the quote unquote American dream in America, I think it should be veterans. And the reason why I chose this topic is because veteran compensation puts us in a very specific position to leverage from. The issue is, once you've already crossed the line of I'm living within my means, meaning my VA compensation is responsible for paying X portion of my bills. Now you're just paycheck to paycheck. Right. Something I've realized when I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. My mom worked fast food. My mom maybe made 20 grand, 25 grand per year, right? We lived paycheck to paycheck. And it was fine. As a kid, it was fine. Now it would really suck because I've tasted some good life, right? But it was fine. When I left the Marine Corps and I got a federal position as a GS-13, right? Definitely more than 2025. I was still living paycheck to paycheck. And you know what? Although the price range was almost 100 grand, paycheck to paycheck sucks. It doesn't matter if that's 20 grand paycheck to paycheck or $1 million paycheck to paycheck. Paycheck to paycheck does not discriminate. And I cannot stress that enough for compensation. I would totally leave your compensation out of being paycheck to paycheck. Because if you do that, you will never have to live paycheck to paycheck. Even if it's like a 40% rating, that compensation would at least give you a bubble above that. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah. The thing is, and I totally agree with you, Clay. It's just so hard when you first start to get this money coming in, especially if you've been really tight, right? It's like, oh man, I'm driving a 1986 Corolla. I would love to get a new car. Then you get to the dealership and you told yourself, okay, I'm going to look at something that's like 7 years old, 5 years old, but then they start walking you over to the other things. And, so it's you need to have some self-control, right? It's very hard. So I get it if people slip. If you slip, it's not the end of the world. Just take a knee, adjust fire, and get back on track. The reality is that I love that you pointed out the 50% mark up front, because now all of a sudden healthcare becomes very all-inclusive. Check with your employer, right? Number one, check with your employer and see if they would allow you to unenroll from their insurance if that works for you. Everybody has different situations, right? I didn't need their insurance. I was fine with VAs. So I did that with my employer, and I was able to get back anywhere between about $400 to $700 per month, depending on the year that it was in, because the contracts for healthcare get renegotiated. So that's more money in my pocket, which then could help with the debt snowball type of things and all of that stuff. Just something to keep into consideration. Then once you get to that 100% mark that we always talk about, that's big dollars there. You got the other things like the registration fee. Doesn't sound like a lot by itself, but it's just one more thing you don't have to pay, right? Your tax exemption, depending on the state you're in, like David was talking about, some states are more generous than others, but pretty much all states have something, which is better than nothing. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that I would throw out there is, once you get to a high VA rating, at least everybody that I've ever known, right? The people I've talked with actually go, well, maybe now I have choices in life. Yeah. Maybe now I don't need to live exactly where I'm at. Maybe I could go get a different job, maybe a job that I actually like, maybe make a little bit less, but the cost of living is less. But then I got this money coming in from the VA, and all of those things combined can help you have a great life. And I will tell you, David, you have the privilege of viewing the nation's real estate. You see the vast difference. If you have a couple just quick kind of, I guess, examples for folks on how different life can be from here to there, I would love to hear them from you, since this is your world, right? Mm-hmm. We tend to hyper focus and be myopic and just look around us. So whatever you could throw in there, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like both of your points. It's every person is individual in what they do, but definitely people kind of clump together. Because I've talked to people that have 100% disability, zero debt, no car, no nothing, and they're looking to buy a home, 800 credit score, like they are completely set. And then you have the other spectrum making 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 a year and barely qualifying to purchase a property. Now, everyone And most of it is just debt management, to be honest. Like you mentioned, like you go to a car dealership thinking one thing and then you kind of get upsold. And that's what people do. And that also happens in real estate where people push the boundaries so high that if one thing goes wrong, all the cards fold in. And that's not a good position, especially if you're with a family. And I've just seen people like go into getting debt tacked on over more and more and more just because of the debt being out of control. But for the people out there that want to focus in, really the budget and doing it manually, the painful part makes you wake up and realize like we're adults, like we have to figure out what's going on, because otherwise it's going to lead us to bankruptcy or not being able to pay our bills, which is even worse. Now, one thing that I do want to touch on, which Clay, your observation on the, hey, if your regular job pays for all your day-to-day bills, you have this compensation. Now you've VA disability, use that VA disability compensation to pay down debt. That's phenomenal. But we all did a video not that long ago about the new changes in HUD-VASH. That allows veterans to be able to get housing waivers and their VA disability doesn't count towards that income. So I've met a lot of people recently that did not realize that their $2,000 a month rent check could actually be paid for by the VA. So if you take not only, hey, I got a regular job, I got my VA disability, now my rent's being paid for, now you can accelerate that. And for most people, I would say that you're not probably sitting on like $100,000 or $200,000 worth of credit card debt. If you are, we got separate things to talk about. But some people will have like, 10, maybe 20,000 life things, come up and you have to pay for them. We get that. So normally within a year or two, you can gain that financial freedom. And like, look, and if you had blemishes on your credit report, the positive part is that after 7 years, it all falls off. The problem, that I see most is that people will, in a way, relapse, and then they may do well for a while, and then they kind of like an event happens. But planning and saving money avoids those things coming up. Like, hey, if I have to put a new furnace in because I live in, let's say, in Florida where it's crazy hot and humid, you really don't want to go out in air conditioning because you might actually ruin your place, and it has a snowball effect in a negative way. Right. So all of this is linked together.
I have a question for you, David.
Okay, I'll go after you.
Let's say a veteran truly is debt-free and their FICO score, right? That credit score essentially doesn't exist at that point. Do you ever run into someone who has a low credit score because they truly have nothing to build it because they've had no debt for X amount of period? Do you run into that situation? And, Dave Ramsey, not that I like me some Dave Ramsey, I'll say that, okay? But he has a statement that he made, and it's all over YouTube. He says, you won't allow me to rent out an apartment because of my credit score, but I can buy the entire complex, right? Do you ever run into that situation where veterans who are, because I know many veterans who are 100% that are debt-free, do you ever run into that issue when it comes to home buying specifically?
Yeah, and this is the downside of that. When you don't have credit, or you used to have credit, and if you don't use it, you lose it. So basically, you run a credit score and it comes back at zero. Okay.
Yeah.
The challenge is that it moves from this is real technical, but it moves from like an automated system to a manual underwrite, and then basically your credit score technically gets quoted interest rates at like a 620 credit score, which is not good, right? You want to kind of be higher, but that's kind of like the average or general thing that happens. Having bad credit or having no credit is better than having bad credit. But when you don't have credit, then still a lender's going to verify like you paying your rent on time for the last 24 months. They need to see, let's say you making, utility bill payments, because they need to see non-traditional credit in order to qualify you. That's why I always recommend at least just have one credit card that you use here and there. That's it. Like I have people that have 1, 2 credit cards, 800 credit scores. They just barely use it, but they understand that credit is a powerful tool. And you do get more favorable terms for financing when you have that. So if kudos for living off the grid, but at the same time, you gotta be somewhat connected in order to get some of the additional perks that you need. Because think about it this way. When you need money the most, no one wants to give it to you. But when you don't need money, people want to give it to you all the time, right?
Yeah.
And your credit score is going to reflect that. Because if you could be in a really good position, but in a snap of a finger, remember, life happens. Look at what happened in North Carolina. We did a whole special on that. But let's say you needed like $20,000 worth of stuff to get your house built to where it needs to be, so it's not going to be rotting or something like that. But you didn't have 20,000. You got 100% disability, but you don't have any credit. How are you going to access money? You won't, because no one's going to give you anything. So the statement of like, hey, being as debt-free as possible, I'm with you. But also, I think you had a caution on the other side of at least have something so you don't put yourself in a jam.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I'm kind of at the same mindset. And, back to the Dave Ramsey thing, right? Like, he's totally against it at all. I'm personally not. And I have my mortgage background, and my thing is, look, if you at a minimum carry a couple, right? So you have a couple trade lines, but look, if you don't want to have any debt, then get a couple secured cards. You're borrowing against yourself, right?
Right.
So, get a couple, little $250 credit cards and just, use them once a month for a take of gas, and one other thing is when just to go back to the car lot thing, when you go to a car lot to buy a car, one strategy is, if you know what you want to do, I know what the maximum is that I want to pay, I know what the maximum is, get pre-approved before you go there from your credit union or whoever. Have them cut you a check. Walk in there with your check with your maximum amount that thing can be, because they'll cut you a check with a maximum that it could be for, and you can handwrite it in. And then that'll save you, right? So at least you have a layer there from yourself, really.
Mm-hmm.
It just will help keep things in check. The more that you can make things a little more difficult, one extra hurdle to go through, it's kind of like putting your money in the savings account that's not attached to your checking, that you have to go to the bank or you have to log on online. It's an extra step. So it makes it a little more difficult. My question for you now, Dave, is, we're talking about a lot of really good situations for people, right? Hey, I'm debt free. I got all this money. Life is great. My credit score sucks only because I have no debt, right? But what about the person that's like, you know what? I had $150,000 in debt. I made horrible decisions. I went through a divorce, whatever it is, life happened. And now I filed bankruptcy. How horrendous is a bankruptcy for somebody looking to get a VA home loan? Can you shed a little light on that? And I mean, you don't have to nail it perfectly. If you don't want to, you can skirt around it. Okay, good. Thank you. I am so glad. Thank you.
So when it comes to bankruptcy, there's really, in general, two ways that consumers can liquidate or come into payment plans. So one is going to be a Chapter 7, basically liquidates all the debt that you have. And then you have a Chapter 13 where you go into a restructure. Obviously, having that event happen is going to have a devastating impact on your credit report. The positive part of that is that I've seen people within a 2-year period of getting out of a bankruptcy be in the 700s for their credit score. But it definitely takes a wake up to do that, because more often than not, I see people relapsing. If you go through the bankruptcy piece, if you do a Chapter 7 on a VA loan, you're waiting 2 years from that time that event happened. Technically, it could be less than, more than a year, but less than 2 if you had extraordinary circumstances. But I've just never even heard of one working like that. And the other one is a Chapter 13. You can use the VA loan after a year, but it requires that the I forgot who, but they have to, like, whoever's managing the trustees got to sign off on you being able to get a home loan.
Not that I would know.
No, that I would know, but I'm just saying, like, the irony here is that I had somebody provided like a letter and saying like, hey, the trustee gave me a pre-approval for X amount of dollars. And I'm like, that's like double than what you qualify for. So don't go based on what they say. And also, when I think you mentioned this earlier, lenders will also tell you, hey, this the car, they're going to say, this is the max you want. Ask for a lower amount if you want a lower amount. So when you go in there, you can't be like, hey, I don't have enough money. But also make sure you're doing your research ahead of time, because cars are the single, this isn't like the deadliest catch, but like this is like the single devastating part for veterans that they can't go into home ownership is because of car payments. Because a $700 car payment is $100,000 mortgage. $100,000. So you, a spouse, 2 cars, and let's just say everything is so expensive these days. I'd say $800 a car, $1,600 right there. If you're buying new cars, that's $250,000 American dollars that you could be affording out there. And then when you look at your monthly spending, that's another big indicator when people are like, I don't, you make $100,000 a year, but I don't have money. I have no money saved up and I live paycheck to paycheck. One, it's going to be managing how you spend money. Like if you're going out every single night, maybe not. Maybe you should join Costco. I don't know. Save some money and cook at home. And then the other part's going to be taking that money that you have extra and paying off your debt to be able to get to it. Because like we mentioned earlier, is that you can make $500,000 a year and still be living paycheck to paycheck. At times, if you put yourself in that position, you might think about maybe restructuring your debt, right? Consolidating it into one. So that way you can manage it more, or reaching out to your credit card companies to let them know, like, is there a payment plan we can go out? So you're not just making the minimum interest payment, and then all you're doing is just a hamster wheel. You're just spinning in a circle, not really going anywhere, giving other people money. I mean, shoot, if you want to give people money, give it to us. We'll take it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys are giving it out to the wrong people. So,
Right.
Yeah, when I got a true story, and this is what opened my eyes to how stupid car loans are. And before I bought the house I'm in now, I had a car loan, and I also simultaneously received some back pay from VA compensation. That back paycheck, if you're watching this and you've gotten a hefty back paycheck, you know what feeling I'm talking about. You check that bank account and you're just like, yes, you just have that feeling real quick. So that was me. In this same moment, I'm also going through this lender to basically examine my entire financial as if I'm going through MEPS and doing like the duck walk again, okay? So we're doing this. I had this car loan. I was advised to put my back pay completely down on the car, which was a good move. I would do it again. What opened my eyes is, I swear on my life, this is a true story. About 2 weeks later, I am on the interstate in Nashville, Tennessee, traveling from Kentucky down to Alabama, and someone plows into my car going like 60 miles an hour. We're in dead stop traffic on the interstate and totals my car. And then I was like, hey, no big deal. I paid it off. I'm going to get a check. I go buy a new car. And the amount I got was not the amount I literally gave, I'm just going to say an amount. I gave 30 grand, got back 15. And I was like, whoa. What? All this happens like that. I was like,
Well,
what?
sir, if you would have purchased gap insurance.
yeah, I was going to say gap insurance.
It was paid off. I had no loan. And so I was just like, what the heck happened? And that's when I realized, you know what?
My back and my neck really hurt.
Yeah.
That's what you realized.
Yeah. So then I got into insurance claims. No, but that is a true story. That kind of opened my eyes. I firmly believe that car loans is the killer of wealth. It's what keeps middle class, in my opinion, is car loans.
Yeah.
My family members, not to call them out if they're watching this, probably not. But if they are, what's up, mama? The amount of new cars in the last 5 years, every time I see it, I'm just like, idiot, right? But side note, we have a super chat. I feel obligated to answer a super chat. We see Polar Bear 65 says, cheer to the panel members and to the chat folks. Awesome. Thank you very much. We have three differents. You have Jason from Veterans Info Tap, David from VA Housing Education, and then Mediocrity at its finest, the Stiff Diff right here.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. That's my line that I'm gonna go with. But yeah, man. To wrap this up, David, I really want to get your thoughts on, generally speaking. I don't want to talk about the spectrum of debt free or the bankruptcy. Let's talk about the masses here. What is the number one issue when veterans reach out to you for using the VA home loan? Right? They want to purchase a home, and they do that through you. Contact information in the description, by the way. What is the number one killer that you see for home loans specifically?
It'll be a combination of the people being maxed out on their credit cards, which then turns into having lower credit scores, which in turn has higher rates, and in turn you qualify for less because then you are paying the 29% interest. So it just you create this circle that it's hard to get out of unless you can break free and pay off the debt. Because sometimes people will get themselves in a position where they're like, hey, I'm going to get an interest-free credit card. I need to buy some things. And then all of a sudden they buy things, and then it expires, and they maxed out their $20,000 credit card. Now, all of a sudden, they don't have the credit to be able to refinance that debt out. So they're stuck paying the 29%. And again, they're in that circle. Credit going down, higher rates. So you kind of, that's the most common thing that I see. And then on top of that, they get a car when their credit is low and they're paying 20% interest on a $25,000 used vehicle. It just kind of puts you in a bad spot. And I've also seen that with those 20% $25,000 car loans, where they buy lemons. And now all of a sudden they stop making payments on them. But I mean, that's a little bit more on the extreme side. But in the general masses, it's really going to be people maxing out their credit cards, and doing the minimum payment, because we can see trending data. And again, just kind of have that vicious circle. So you really need to step back, control spending, budget, lay out everything, and come up with a monthly plan to tackle that. Or if you got wealthy family, maybe they'll give you some money. Have them call me too.
Yeah. Right. So
and I've seen that happen. I've seen people get bailed out. And another thing people will do is, if you do own a house, is people will refinance and pull equity out of their property to pay off debt. Is that a smart thing to do? It's debatable, because if you have a really low interest rate, now rates are higher. But if you're saving $2,000 a month on your payments, it's really up to you on that. Like, I can't advise you one way or another. You really have to kind of see what your financial is on that.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, David. And the thing is that, look, it is an option, right? To do a cash out refinance, pay off some debt. Is it right for everybody? Everybody's circumstance is different. And like Clay and I always talk about on the veterans benefits side, it is the world of nuance, right? There's not, everybody's not cookie cuttered out. And here's my word of advice for folks. It's have a conversation, right? David's available. Have a conversation, get some numbers going, and see if it makes sense. If it does, it does. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Only you and maybe your financial advisor or whoever you bring into the mix can figure that out. Another thing I wanted to ask you, David, is, and I know nobody here has a crystal ball, but we're anticipating, I think, that rates could potentially go down in the years or in the months to come, potentially. If they do, right, and somebody had, let's say, a loan that they got, whatever, 6 months ago or something like that.
Yep.
They could potentially be the bottom line is that people should keep their eyes open on current rates. They could end up dipping and being lower than what they're currently at, and it could be advantageous for them to do an Earl. I'd love for you to talk about that, because if we're talking about trying to create wealth, well, part of that is decreasing the amount that you owe. And if you decrease the amount you owe and you make the same amount that you're already making, that means you're going to pay it off faster, which means you'll be debt-free in the world that Clay loves so much. So
I love it.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. So an interest rate reduction refinance loan is when you already have a VA home loan, rates have dropped, and you have to meet a couple requirements. One, rates got to be 0.5% lower. Your closing costs, you have to be able to recoup those costs within 36 months. That's a big one, but I'm going to expand on that a little bit here. And you have to have at least made 6 mortgage payments, and it's 210 days from your first mortgage payment. You qualify for doing an interest rate reduction refinance loan. But again, because people will call like, hey, can I do this? But I have a conventional loan right now. You can't. The beauty of that program is that you just need a source of income to qualify. So if you have a 10% disability rating, but $1 million house, it doesn't make a difference. You still can qualify for the reduction. I think, when a lot of people reach out and they're like, hey, David, I got these quotes from a lender. Hey, can you take a look at it? And I look at it and go like, man, if we're spending, $6,000 to save just the bare minimum on a monthly payment, why are we doing that? And another thing I want viewers to understand with these interest rate reduction refinance loan is that you can do odd term refinances, meaning like, let's say you've paid on your mortgage for 2 years and you're like, well, I don't want to reset my mortgage for another 30. You can actually do a 28-year mortgage on a new mortgage. So gives you some flexibility. Again, happy to review whatever you guys have, because definitely people have reached out and said, hey, like I have this quote. Can you take a look at it? And just a lot of times veterans get overcharged. I see it all the time. I think on average, veterans overpay $38 million in junk fees every month because there's over 25,000 VA home loans done every month. So it's crazy.
It sounds like I need to go into the VA home loan business, to be honest with you. No,
I don't know about that.
I have no parting shots. Jason, let me know your final thoughts, and then we'll kind of kick it to David to close out the live stream for us here.
Yeah.
Also, real quick, we just got our new member, Scott Pratt. Thank you for your service, brother or sister. We don't know, right? We definitely appreciate that. All right.
All right. So, some of my last thoughts here are when it comes to really establishing yourself in a way to become financially well and solid, you need to make sure that you are, 1, mindful, 2, that you put barriers in place to make maybe certain things a little more difficult to fall into the prey, be the prey at the dealership, so to speak. But also being aware of what opportunities are out there. And I think that home ownership really is one of the biggest ways to become, financially sound. Personally, I mean, I know there's some people that don't think that way, I guess, but I think that owning real estate is absolutely a way. I really think that being able to leverage loans, and I'd love part of your final thoughts here, David, to be on how somebody could actually leverage their VA home loan on a current house and then end up either buying another house and moving into it and making that one a rental, or maybe this is my first one. I'm going to buy a unit property. I'm going to buy a 2, 3, 4 unit property. These are ways in which you can generate income and wealth and own an appreciating piece of property. So I'd love to hear from you, David, and you can close this out.
Yeah, I think that we actually, you know what? Our next live event should be around turning real estate into investment properties, because it is very relevant. People don't want to sell their homes, but they want to buy other ones. And how do you leverage that? It's actually pretty simple, because what we see a lot of veterans do is actually rent out their current property, make about $1,000 to $1,500 a month, because they bought it when prices were much lower. They buy a property at current market value, and then they just use that extra money to pay off the other mortgage. So one mortgage is being paid off with the current tenant. Now they're helping you pay off the second mortgage, effectively changing what your rate is and how much interest you're paying. So very powerful tool. And I'll close it out with this, is that only you can help you to be able to get financially in a position that works. I'm not going to come to your house. Jason, Clay, we're not going to your house to say, hey, you know what? You need to start budgeting. Let's take a look at all your financial documents. It starts with you taking that first step to identify that, yes, I have a problem. I need to go through all my finances. I need to pull out an Excel sheet. I need to pull out the printer. look at my life. And then from there, you can make it better. You can reach out to me. Happy to help you. You can reach out to HUD consultants. They do it for free, and they'll help you with your credit to get it to where you want to be by helping you submit, let's say there's discrepancies. You don't have to go and pay these sharks, $50 to $200 a month. You can actually do it for free. Or like you guys are watching us, you can check out YouTube and just kind of see what tools, how can I write these letters? You got ChatGPT to help you with that. There's a lot of tools, but I'll close it out with that. It all begins with you.
Yeah. One last comment. If you want to reach out to David about your specific home situation, whatever that looks like, you're going to see his calendar link below on all the channels. Just go ahead, schedule an appointment with him. You get to see this shiny, bald head. Talk to him one-on-one right in the camera. Sorry, David. I just couldn't. It's just so beautiful. All right. But that's all I got. All right.